Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Irish Wristwatch production. My name is Brandon, and this is my review for Legend of Korra Book 4 Balance, Episode 2, entitled Korra Alone. Yo, this episode, man. This episode was super good. I thought it was awesome. So, in contrast to the last episode, this episode was sort of covering the 3-year gap between the end of Book 3 and the beginning of this book, and it just focuses on Korra. What we see for the most part is just Korra recovering through physical therapy with Katara, reading letters from her friends Mako, Bolin, and Asami. She gets a visit from Tenzin, and she spends quite a large chunk of time in the Southern Water Tribe. I want to say like 2.5 years. Before she leaves the Southern Water Tribe, she sends a letter to Asami, and Asami only because she finds it difficult to tell Mako or Bolin about her problems. She only really finds it easy to talk to Asami about them. Anyway, we see her, she goes, and she travels to a town, and we see that this guy wants to take a picture of her. He's got a picture of Aang doing his same old marble trick, only it's with some seaweed wraps or some logs, I guess. And she fails to stop a robbery. She gets beat because she can't get through a block in her head where she constantly sort of stops up, and that's where she gets beat, and it's usually caused by a vision of Zahir. And so she goes to Republic City and she sees a hallucination of herself in the Avatar state with the chains and everything, how she looked at the end of Book 3 in the final fight with Zahir, and she immediately turns around and begins to travel the world. She goes back to the Tree of Time, and a bunch of spirits flock to her, and they try to help her, and they tell her, one of the spirits mentions that he can't sense Rava's energy because Korra is not in touch with Rava. Korra cannot seem to get to the Avatar stage. The Tree of Time is not having the impact it did back in Book 2, which is still confusing as to whatever it did. And this little spirit offers to help her out, but she says, no, I have to do this alone. So she travels around the world, and we see her constantly seeing this image of herself before she finally gets to Republic City, where it leads her to an underground fighting arena, the same arena that we saw her at the end of the previous episode. We see her fight, she loses, but we see that during the fight she was actually seeing herself in the Avatar state. And so then eventually she is led out of the city by a little dog, and this little dog was actually barking at this vision of the Avatar state, so Korra knows that she's not just crazy now. The spirit leads her into the swamp and reveals that it's the little spirit from before, and says, if I tried to tell you that I was going to help you, would you have listened? No. And the spirit books off. So then Korra goes after the spirit, and she ends up fighting this hallucination of herself, ends up getting dragged sort of into the ground, like totally helpless, into what looks like the Mercury from Book 3. We see her wake up. She wakes up in this underground room, and we see Toph, who's very old, and we find out that Toph has actually been living in the swamp. And Toph mentions that if the spirits brought you to the swamp, then you should listen. Me and your past life were very good friends. And she calls Korra Twinkle Toes, and Korra was like, Toph, and then cuts out. So very interesting overall. My guess right now is that swamp, I'm not sure if it is or it isn't. It's unclear for sure, but I'm assuming that's the swamp from, for those of you who remember from Avatar The Last Airbender, the same swamp that Aang, Sokka, and Katara went into, and they saw visions, and Aang saw a vision of Toph, who was supposed to be his earthbending teacher. And so if it's the same swamp, that'll be kind of interesting, because I'm not really sure where Republic City is exactly in relation to the rest of the Earth Kingdom and in relation to that swamp. I also have a feeling that this hallucination of herself is in fact Rava, and Rava is trying to communicate with Korra in any way possible, but because of Korra's trauma from what happened at the end of Book 3, there's it's sort of a violent connection, and it's very uneasy. That's my theory. But anyway, I really love this episode. I thought it was really good, and now we're caught up on what Korra did, and now we can get to what's going on with the Earth Kingdom, because as we can see throughout that, Kuvira was appointed into the position of taking charge of the Earth Kingdom. Bolin left with Kuvira to help restore order and also to become stronger. A couple things I forgot to mention from my last review. One, the bandits that raided Opal and Kai when they were bringing food back to the village. Apparently that bandit, I went back and looked at it, apparently that bandit looks just like one of the bandits that Kuvira caught. And it always struck me as odd as why bandits would have a plane and fly around and stealing cargo from Bison. So it leads now furthering to the theory that Kuvira is just bad news, not that she already was. I mean, they're making her out to be such a bad guy because of the fact that she would send bandits who she said would pledge service to the Great Uniter to stop Opal and Kai from bringing food back to ensure control over the village. Another thing that I wanted to point out is I forgot to point out some of the things about the relationships. Kai and Jinora are still in a relationship, but we haven't seen them together. But according to Kai, it's been great. He could be lying. It's unclear. And we haven't really seen anything from Jinora. And as far as Opal and Bolin, it's very uneasy because Bolin is working for Kuvira and Opal's brother, who are just bags of dicks, basically, and Opal's not a fan of that. So that about covers everything. So super excited to see what happens next. It's the final book, guys. It's the final book. There's only 11 more episodes left. What am I gonna do? Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye bye.